So I will call this meeting of the Madison Plan Commission for September 23rd, 2024 to order. First, we will have some information from our technical facilitator, Jesse.
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do the best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After all register and speak, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Next, we have agenda item 1, General Plan Commission public comment. There was a comment posted in the legislative file for review. And Megan, do we have any other public comments since we spoke?
There are no registered speakers.
Perfect, thank you. Next up is disclosures and recusals. Members of the Plan Commission should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Do we have any disclosures or recusals? Seeing none, we will move on to the minutes of the September.
Chair Solheim.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Heck has his hand raised. I'm not sure if he
does.
Indicating. Okay.
Sorry, I was too quick for that. Commissioner. I can't seem to be able to unmute you.
I unmuted myself.
There we go. Thanks. Great.
Yes, I just wanted to disclose on agenda item 8 that I have done some volunteer work with the developers and property owners of St. John's Lutheran Church, but there's been no financial involvement on my part. Therefore, I just thought I better disclose that I had that relationship, and it won't affect my vote.
Thank you, Commissioner. Unmuting now seems to work, so thank you, Jesse, if you change that. So moving on to the minutes of the September 9th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve? So moved by Alder Uguer. Do we have a second? Second by Alder Field. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. Seeing no raised hand, the motion passes unanimously. Next up is the schedule of meetings. We have regular meetings on October 7th, 21st, and November 4th and 18th. All of those will be virtual at 5:30 p.m. And then there is a special meeting on Thursday, November 7th at 5 p.m. in the Madison Municipal Building. And we have the consent agenda next. Apologies.
Yes, we can do that next.
Okay, great. Next is the consent agenda. It has been the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which staff believes an application has been sufficiently reviewed to support approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by the various city departments, and in which the applicant accepts those conditions and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition. So the items that we have proposed for the consent agenda tonight are posted on the screen. So we have items 6, 11, 12, 17, and 18 for consent. Item 7 to be placed on file without prejudice, and items 10, 15, and 16 to be referred. Are there any requests for separation? Seeing none, I will read these into the record. Item 6, Legistar 84688, 10 Odana Court, District 19, consideration of a conditional use in the Suburban Employment District for general retail, consideration of a conditional use in the SE District for a coffee shop, and consideration of a conditional use in the SE District for an outdoor eating area, all to allow a limited production and processing facility with retail sales and a cafe with outdoor eating area. For placing on file without prejudice, we have item 7, Legistar 84823, 1 Dempsey Road, Alder District 15, consideration of a conditional use in the Commercial Center District for a payday loan business. For referral, we have item 10, Legistar 84826, 3021 Winona Way, Alder District 14, consideration of a conditional use to allow construction of an addition to a single-family residence on a lakefront parcel. Again, for consent, item number 11, Legistar 84449, 2001 Londonderry Drive, Alder District 18, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a financial institution. Along with that is agenda item 12, Legistar 84450, 2001 Londonderry Drive, consideration of a conditional use in the CCT district for a multifamily dwelling with greater than 36 units to construct a 4-story apartment building with 105 units. For referral, we have item 15, Legistar 84821, 2250 Roth Street, Alder District 12, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence, along with agenda item 16, Legistar 85057, creating section 28.022-00690 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 2248 to 2254 Roth Street from TRC4 to PR, Alder District 12. And then for consent, agenda item 17, Legistar 84822, 346 East Lakeside Street, Alder District 13, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence in Olenterville Park, along with agenda item 18, Legistar 85056, creating section 28.022-00689 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 346 East Lakeside Street from TRC2 to PR, Alder District 13. I believe that is all that we have. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved by Alder Field and seconded by Alder Duncan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, I will assume unanimous consent. The consent agenda passes unanimously. All right. Next up, we have agenda item 2, Legistar 84452, presentation on the 2025 city budget.
Thank you. Hi, this is Christy Baumel, one of the deputy mayors with the city, here to talk about this a little bit today. Do you mind if I share my screen? All right, let me get slides. And can you see the PowerPoint? Did that come up okay? Okay, great. So we wanted to talk to you today. You've probably heard that the city's working through some challenges related to its operating budget and pursuing a referendum this November that will go to the voters in November. We've had a number of committees ask us, what does this mean for our body of work? And we realized that a number of our committees are very closely intertwined with city business, or are the people who carry out city business. And so extending kind of basic budget education beyond just staff and common council, but also to a number of committees might be useful, both to understand what the issue is, since you spend so much time working on these issues with the city, and to understand particularly how a referendum passing or a referendum not passing would impact work that you're involved in. So this is a slide deck that's full of detail. I'm going to try to go fast because you have a full agenda. I'll skip some slides, but I want to give you broad strokes, and happy to ask questions and jump back to slides related to questions if there are some. So just to kind of anchor us, this is something the Plan Commission probably knows better than most. Madison's growing and growing fast. Our bottom blue line here shows in our 2018 comprehensive plan, we had low, medium, and high growth scenarios. We're above the highest growth scenario as of 2020. Now, in truth, I think we're above this second line, this green line as well, because it predicts a population in 2025 that the Capital Area Regional Plan Commission says we reached last year in 2023. So we may literally be 2 years away from hitting the 300,000 mark, which would be 30,000 more people than we had in 2020, which feels like yesterday. So we're growing fast. That's good. We have a community where people want to live. We have a strong economy. Those are not bad problems to have. But the challenge is that a lot of the revenues into our budget are not based on natural influxes of what revenue is being exchanged in our community. They're based on state policy, and state policy is not set up to recognize, the situation that we have, that essentially cities have to grow for population and for inflation. I'll explain that a little bit more. So this is a quick snapshot of our revenue sources in our city budget. You will see a lot of it is focused on property taxes. So let's talk about what you don't see is income tax or sales tax. In other states, cities may have access to those. In Wisconsin, they do not. The idea is that the state would collect sales tax and income tax, and they would share some of that back with local governors through this thing called shared revenue. So you see this state aid section that is 11%. A lot of that is this shared revenue that they're supposed to share back with us. So the things I want to touch on are some problems we have with shared revenue from the state and property tax restrictions. So on the shared revenue side, it's not shared back equally. So this is a slide showing how much each municipality gets back in shared revenue per capita. Madison gets the lowest in the state. I think technically we're second lowest, but we're second lowest with like 1 penny difference between us. So for all practical purposes, we're the lowest in the state. We get $29 per person. The city average across the state is $195. For perspective, the referendum we're seeking is $22 million. If we received that state average, we would have $54 million more in our budget. It's not insignificant. So that is one issue. Another way to look at it is that for every dollar we give to the state, we get 18 cents back. And that's not just to City of Madison government, that's to this geography. So that's this portion of the county, that's the school district, that's the city. So we are working, we hope to keep working to get a better shared revenue formula worked out with the state in the coming years. But at the moment, this is what we're working with. And that drives the reliance on property tax because we're limited in the revenue sources that we have access to elsewhere. And property taxes, we have another problem. As communities all over Wisconsin started relying more and more on this as their state aid formulas froze in time 20 years ago, the state decided to limit that. They were concerned about it, and so they put limits on that. We And what that means is we are allowed to grow our property tax based on a formula called net new construction, which is supposed to be a proxy for population growth. It's not population growth, it's more based on construction, but it's a proxy for growth. It does not include anything related to inflation. So that is where we get into problem. Wages are not what they were in 2011, nor our healthcare costs, nor our goods and services we purchase. You all know this, right? So what you see between the top line is population and inflation, and where we would be if we had a formula that accounted for those, and the bottom line is where we are. So we have a growing gap that grows every year that we're trying to fill. So that's why we call it a structural deficit. I'm not going to read all of this, but the reason we call it that is because it's inherent. We're inherently limited in our revenue below what our cost to continue operations is every year. Inflation over 20 years has been 3 to 4% a year. Our revenues are allowed to grow at 1 to 2% a year. So it's just a gap that grows wider over time. I'll skip it, but made a little bit worse by the pandemic. That's what the point of that is. And so what we've been doing about it is stretching. Essentially, we leave positions unfilled, we cut positions, we do more with less, we find a way to gain efficiencies, and we've been doing that for a very long time. This shows that had we kept pace with our population growth, we would have 217 more employees at the city than we do. To give one example, trash pickup. So more homes means more garbage cans, which means more garbage to pick up. We add about 800 new garbage cans every year to the city. We have not hired a new driver in 7 years. We have been trying to find ways to become more efficient, and efficiency is not a bad thing. That's a good thing, and if we can find ways to do it, fantastic. But there comes a point where you've squeezed all of the juice out of that, and you just need to hire a new driver. And so that's where we're struggling, is we feel like we've kind of gotten to the end of our rope of let's try to find a way to do more with less. And now what we're facing is we're just going to have to do less because we have less. So that's the crux of the issue. This is another way to say this. This is, I kind of already said, we've been trying to find ways to fix this every year. And this is a highly detailed look at what we've done. And sometimes that's putting more money on employees' costs. Sometimes it's taking cuts and finding efficiencies. Sometimes it's finding a new revenue source. Like, for example, a couple of years ago, you might remember we instituted a resource recovery special charge for recycling. The first year I worked here, we adopted a vehicle registration fee. So those are examples of how we've managed to close the gap in the past, and we just feel like we've done all of the things, and we can't, and we need to look to a different solution. I don't want to go into all of this detail, but we've made a 5-year budget plan with and without a referendum. This is the with a referendum, and that bright blue is the 22 million it would fill. The point is that we would find ways to, our costs grow every year, which is why this line gets longer every year, but we have a plan for how we might fill that each year for about 5 years. And in those years, 2026, 2027, as our state legislature is changing, and as they see more and more cities are continuing to go to referendum because they're also struggling with this challenge, we're very hopeful that we can work out a better deal with the state, whether it's a change to shared revenue, whether it's getting 0.5 cent sales tax, whether it's getting the authority to establish a regional transit authority. There's all kinds of ways more revenue could be in the mix, and that's what our plan is. Without a referendum, and what I really wanted to talk about is what happens then. You see that bright blue disappears. I mentioned a couple of those new special charges we've put in place, or fees. There would be this dark blue is more of those, as many as possible. And so it's we would have to find more revenue somewhere, but we don't think we could find enough. And we would also start having to make some severe and pretty serious cuts. The orange is the cuts we would look at, 6 million in 2025 and growing after that. To get into the topic at hand of what might it look like for this body of work and other bodies of work in the city if it were not to pass, I guess I have some of that on the following slides, and the lead into that would be what you see on the following slides are so the mayor asked every department, as she is working to put together a budget, she asked every department, if you had to cut 5% from your budget, what would you propose to cut? Nobody wanted to propose these things. She didn't want to ask for these things. So I don't want to suggest these feel like low-hanging fruit, but I think the low-hanging fruit have already been picked. So it just had to go deeper and a little more painful. But the point I want to make is, one, in total, 5% of every budget adds up to about $23 million. And that means she would not have to take all of those cuts. She'd have to take about a quarter of those cuts this year. But what else the other message of this slide is, in 5 years, she'd have to take them all without a referendum. So that's kind of the context of what you might look at there. I have some related to planning more on this page, but essentially we would be reducing, I'm not going to read all of them. You can see them and I'll share these slides. Eliminating a code enforcement officer, a housing inspector, and information clerk positions. This would slow down development inspections and approvals, increasing fees for signs, for tourist rooming houses, for certificates of occupancy, discontinuing some arts grants programs in planning and placemaking activities, the neighborhood grants programs, public engagement for our area plans, reduced Alder expense accounts for engagement, poll workers, reduced outreach to people experiencing homelessness, discontinuing support to the downtown bid or summer meals or community gardens, reducing our CARES program, reducing or eliminating Sunday and evening hours at libraries, parks aquatics programs, ice rinks, beach cleaning, a fire engine company, police outreach, their gang and neighborhood crime team, traffic patrol, community patrol and policing, access community health, violence prevention, less IT coverage of BCC meetings. There's some proposed reduction of some boards, commissions, and committees as well. Reduced street repair, brush collection, reduced metro night and weekend service, the crossing guard program. These are not even enjoyable things to say out loud, to be honest. So nobody wants to make these cuts to our community. It's a frustrating situation to be in when we know the revenue is flowing. We know the revenue is there to the state. We have nothing but, it's a strong economy. We have nothing but policy barriers to accessing funding that's causing a shortage. So, but really, I just want to, between transit and some planning and placemaking and development processing speed and inspections, those struck me as the ones that were most directly linked, but I think everything is somewhat of interest, so I didn't want to take everything else off of the slide. Language of the referendum, I'll just skip that. In terms of what it would cost, it's on the average home, which is almost $460,000, it'd be about $19 a month. We tried to take a guess on renters, but it really, how landlords distribute costs to renters can take a lot of different shapes. If you were to take the straight per unit value and assume it is divvied out the same way, that'd be about $7 a month. But it's hard to know exactly. And so the final slide I have is just timeline. The mayor is currently looking at all of the agency proposals for the budget. She'll be developing a budget assuming the referendum passes, and essentially a substitute that would be substituted in if the referendum doesn't pass, that would include those 6 million in cuts. She'll release those budgets on October 8th for the Common Council. They'll go to the Finance Committee the week of October 28th, and they'll ultimately be adopted by the Common Council the week of November 12th, after knowing the outcome of the election. So I just wanted to give everybody a chance to understand this and ask questions, because you are so tightly knit with city operations, and also share what it would mean for topics that are close to the work the Plan Commission does. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deb. Are there any questions from commissioners? Don't believe we need a vote. So thank you again, Deputy Mayor. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Take care.
All right. Next is agenda item 3, Legistar 85038, authorizing the Planning Division to lead the preparation of the Southeast Area Plan and adopting a public participation plan. I believe we will start with a presentation from staff.
Yes. Jesse, if you could I can stay off camera if that's fine. Otherwise, whatever you want. Hello, everybody. My name is Rebecca Kinnair. I'm an urban design planner with the City of Madison, and I, along with my colleague Jeff Greger, are leading the Southeast Area Plan that will be hopefully kicking off very soon after this meeting and Common Council, and then after the budget is done in November. I'm going to share my screen. All right, and of course I'm not on the first slide, but we'll get there. So thank you again for letting me present to you tonight. My colleague Urvashi Martin will be also talking about the Southwest side at the next presentation. So some of what I'm going to say here tonight is really going to be applicable to both plans, but I'm just going to get into some of the details of this South Area Plan. Our team is myself, Jeff Greger, Brianna Collins, Dan McAuliffe, Alyssa Mugavero, and Chris Wells. So this is the area that the Southeast counts. It really has the Beltline Interstate on the east, Monona Drive and Monona and Starkweather Creek on the west, Highway 30 on the north, and there's Sigel Cow Road and a few other Monona and McFarland borders on the south. Here's a better map that shows that. So the 2020 census shows that this has just over 11,000 housing units, just over 25,000 people, and about 25% of the residents in this area are considered people of color and or Hispanic and Latinx. So we have a very diverse population for the city of Madison in this area here. We also, and this applies to both plans, really. You have now been yourselves through 2 plans that have been adopted recently. So you're learning along with us what these benefits are of having an area plan. It's really having clear plan recommendations for all 12 areas and of the geography of Madison, and making sure that we have plans that are up to date and updated every 10 years, and making sure that we don't have old plans that sit on a shelf and are no longer relevant to a lot of the things that are happening to the city. We have full city coverage, and we can have those consistent plan topics so that all of these area plans, when they're done at the end of the 10 years, will have a similar layout and how they address all of the issues, so that it's more plain language for people that live in the city to understand them. And it really helps bring a lot of those recommendations together and work really nicely with the comprehensive plan. We're also using this as enhanced coordination on other city initiatives with other city departments. And one of the things that we continue to work on, and will always continue to work on, is really a lot of our equity issues and making sure we're emphasizing feedback from traditionally underrepresented groups. We mostly stick with the main elements of the comprehensive plan. So looking at land use and transportation, we'll look at the future land use map, maximum building heights, zoning, streets, sidewalks, access to transit. We'll look at issues related to neighborhoods and housing in terms of mixes of neighborhood of housing types, food access, housing and affordability. We'll also look at economy and opportunity. So looking at entrepreneurial opportunity, tax incremental financing, land making, and economic development, as well as our cultural and character section, which is a lot of what the planning department does as well. We also finish out with the last two elements of green and resilient and effective government, and looking at a very high level coordination with our Parks Division, which has been very successful in the last plan, and we hope to continue that success with this plan so that we can they can look at all of their master plans within these planning areas while we look at other things and also get input together with parks. Effective government, health and safety. And this last one is the community action strategy. That is kind of a new name that's trying to be a little bit more plain language than the community development block grant, which is what we used to call those planning areas that were officially eligible to receive some federal money to do some implementation and also federal money to do planning for those areas. So in the Southeast area, we have several different census tracts that are eligible. And we kind of did a deeper dive into all of what makes them eligible. And after looking at that, while we have, all of these areas, we looked at this Heastan neighborhood between State Highway 30 and Milwaukee Street as the one that we are focusing on. We met with the CDBG commission last week to hear their input, and they also agreed that this is a good one to start with because it does have a lot of isolation because of the connections of Highway 30 and Milwaukee Street and the very few kind of connections through this neighborhood. And also there's some very large areas of multifamily housing that is, again, also kind of isolated. And so it's a chance to look at what are ways that we can try to improve those. We'll also look at capacity building, community and stakeholder relationships, and then we'll have about $400,000 from the federal government to do some physical improvements, but that has to be shared between the Southeast and the Southwest plans. So that's why we really wanted to dial in on one area. One of the other things that Jeff and I and Urvashi and Kirsty have the benefit of is learning lots of lessons from the West and Northeast plans. We included in the legislative file kind of a larger memo if you really wanted to dive in a little bit more on some of those lessons learned. But really the high level ones is what we have on this slide. And that's the importance of educating what plans are and what they are not early and often throughout the process. Really emphasizing what land use is versus what zoning is, emphasizing what planning is versus implementation, and what, the city can do versus what private development does, and setting those expectations. We also can do a better job. Not that they did a bad job last time, but we can try to improve upon repeating back the things that we've heard from the public during those meetings. And also allowing for better internal coordination with city agencies. We were joking in a meeting the other day that we were kind of flying the plane while we were making it the last time. And now we get a chance to really use those relationships that we continue to build on with the city agencies like parks and engineering and economic development. And now that we know what we're doing better in terms of this framework planning, we can have better coordination between those different city agencies. We also heard that the open houses with multiple city agencies was really well received and attended, and people felt like they could ask questions because people were there and they could get several questions answered at the same time. So we'll continue to try to use that as a method to bring people out. And we're also going to continue to experiment with public engagement methods. I've had some luck with social practice art in the past and other different engagement methods. So we will continue to do that as we move forward. In the public participation overview, this is our plan so far. And I believe that these slides even are slightly different than the public participation plan that we have attached, only because we thought we'd get started a little earlier than we had, but we really wanted to wait until after the election and after the budget gets passed, because that's also going to help us understand what kind of public engagement opportunities we might have next year versus if we don't have that funding in the budget that the deputy mayor just talked about. So really, this quarter and next quarter, we're getting the background info and we're figuring out who the stakeholders are and building that list. We've already been out at lots of different events over the summer. So we've gotten to let people know that we're coming and we're going to be starting this planning process. But it also allows us to start to put together that an RFP, or maybe it's more of an RFQ for community partners and engagement specialists so that they can start getting under contract for the limited amount of funds that we have left from this year from planning. And then in quarter 4, we're really going to have that first public meeting, have some early focus groups. We are working with 2 PhD students at the university who are survey experts, and then we're going to be working with them on doing a survey, thinking about what those issues and opportunities are. A really great conversation I had with Alyssa, one of those, our intern and PhD student, is the idea about what an issue means to people, and what do opportunities mean to people. Planning staff thinks opportunities are opportunities for things to change, right? And make things different and improve a neighborhood, where that may seem more of an issue to some neighborhoods, and they might see things that we think of as opportunities as not opportunities. So I think that's why some of our education is really important. And then we'll start to engage through some of the neighborhood groups and NRTs that we have started building that list of. And then next year, we'll start throughout the year as having a public meeting series and focus groups. We also have started working and coordinating with the UW Peoples program, both at La Follette for the southeast side. I'll let Urvashi talk about Memorial, but they both have People program for students that are interested in going to the UW for school, and it's a way for them to start learning about what critical thinking and all sorts of things that it really is required to be successful in college. And it's just also a really great opportunity to get involved in the high schools. We've been talking with our friends in the Economic Development Division about maybe some different ways of doing business outreach than we did last time, and thinking about something like walking around the areas that have businesses and reaching them directly. And then eventually, developing draft recommendations. And that's really next year is going to be heavy on the, getting those recommendations together and getting feedback on them. And then we're expecting in 2026 is when we start that kind of final public comments using our Conveo commenting tool, which has been really successful, and then adoption. So because this is mostly on there, we're talking, so you can ask me anything you want, but this is also just because it's attached to the Legistar if anybody wants to sign up for our listserv. And that is what I have. Any questions? Yes, I still almost called you Alder Heck. Sorry, Patrick.
Thank you, and thanks, Rebecca. Just a thought, in your materials, you mention struggling to get the input of renters. And you didn't, I think many of the plans and strategies that you talked about have an eye towards that, but I didn't see the word renters anymore other than that.
That's fair.
Do you have, particular new ideas about how to reach more renters, given your experience and the other 2 plans that you've worked on?
Sure. I think one of the things that we're doing first is trying to do a much deeper dive on a survey that we are hoping will reach using She doesn't like it when I call it a scientific survey because she says people then think you're studying them, and it's not that kind of. But using more scientific methods of surveying with how they reach people and how they use and the PhD students know much more of the words than I do, but how they use their methods to reach more people, and so that is kind of a starting point to, I think, how we're going to try to see who we are reaching with that. And then once we get that, we can, although we're keeping it anonymous, we can send, if they're interested, we can send them another email, like another survey later. So if we do reach a bunch of renters, there's a way to ask them follow-up questions if they allow us to ask them follow-up questions. So anonymous, but also gives us this way to, again, they have the ways that I don't have. But so I think that's one way that we're going to try to do it. Another way is we are developing the stakeholder list, and we are working with an RFP/RFQ to try to see if there are engagement specialists out there that might have better ideas than we have. So I don't have a great answer for you, Patrick, but it is on our list of, we're going to watch what we're doing and see if it's working, and if it's not, try new things. And that's kind of what we do all along.
Good. I also read that trying to get information out through perhaps apartment managers was not very fruitful, I guess.
Yes, it was not. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Alder McKinney, Harrington McKinney?
Thank you very much. Could you tell me how the neighborhood associations within these two areas are pulled into, how we're reaching, how we're engaging, and how do we connect individuals who do not respond to surveys and that kind of tool of communication?
Sure. Well, my fellow staff, Urvashi Martin, is also here, so she might also have some other thoughts when she presents the Southwest. So, and she feel free to step in anytime, Urvashi. But we have been, at least in the Southeast team, we've already reached out to many of our neighborhood associations and have gone to their summer events and summer meetings. Not all of them, but because of, we couldn't make all of them for various reasons, but we've made those contacts so we can come to them. I've been to the Glendale neighborhood. We had somebody go to the Elvium Resource Fair. We have a meeting with some of the Kennedy PTO, for example. So reaching out to some of the PTOs is another way we're going to try to reach out to the different neighborhood groups. But we continue to kind of build those lists and reach out to kind of as many people as possible. And we will continue to try to do that. Yes, Sarah.
Thank you. These are a couple of questions and comments kind of related to the final approval of the West and Northeast area plans. I was just wondering, given that we did get some public comment expressing some citizens that were surprised at things that were added to the final version of the plans, is there a strategy to kind of help inform the public of the version changes? Because I understand that these go through a lot of different committees and commissions before we get to the final resting place of the approval. And I just wonder if there's a better way to kind of demonstrate all of the changes or additions or edits that have happened throughout the process.
I think that is that is such a good question, because that is such a big issue, right? That, so many things change over time, and the people that are really engaged, know what's changing. But I think, for example, you might be referring to like the NACUSA, right? Because it was on some early boards, and it didn't kind of raise anybody's discussion then, so it just kind of stayed there, and it kind of fell off people's radar screens, and they thought it was new. So I think it's continually a matter of that first bullet when we talked about how we have to constantly re-educate people on what these plans are and how they will affect them. I think we will just have to continue to try to be aware of those Nakusas or those old stock creeks that like are the thing that like people are really invested in, so that we can continue to show people how those things change, and things that we get better feedback on, we can spend less time on. We're never going to be able to spend, the 100% on everything because there's such large areas, but I think we'll just have to work with folks on finding out what those things are that are getting them interested or afraid of or not understanding, and try to help them understand what those things are. So it's a continued process. That's why we're glad we're second doing this process, because we can learn a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's going to be hard to really nail that down. So I appreciate that you're cognizant of it and that you're thinking about it as we approach these new area plans. My second comment, I know that you talked about the difference between private development and local development, but I also just wanted to highlight the number of state and federal highways that are in both area plans, and it might be useful to inform citizens of those challenges and restrictions as well.
Sure. Well, specifically in the southeast area, I've been on the staff team that's looked at the Highway 151 or Highway 51 South Stoughton Road corridor, like about for the last year or so. So that's going to be that is the spine running down the middle of Southeast. So that's really going to, I think, be at the forefront of what a lot of people are interested, and a lot of things that are sort of not completely out of our control, but out of our control. So our best bet there is to make sure that people are educated, give them the tools to reach out to WSDOT to find out those answers, and just try to merge those things, because it at least for Southeast, it's going to be a huge issue. And so we will do our best.
Thank you. That's all the questions that I had.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Questions for Rebecca or the team? If not, I will be looking for a motion.
Yeah, I'll move approval.
Second. Seconded by Commissioner Sanders. Any discussions on the motion? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand, the motion is approved unanimously. All right, we will move on to agenda item 4, Legistar 85045, authorizing the Planning Division to lead the preparation of the Southwest Area Plan and adopting a public participation plan. We have Urvashi.
Thank you, Chair Solheim. Let me share my screen here. All right. So as Rebecca mentioned, the Southeast and the Southwest area plans are the next two area plans that are being developed. And I'm Urvashi Martin. I work in the Planning Division. I'm one of the project managers for the Southwest area plan. And also joining here with me is my colleague, Kirsty Lach, who's the other project manager working on the Southwest area plan. And listed on the screen are the other team members from the Planning Division who'll be working on this plan. So a little bit about the Southwest area. The planning area is bounded by the Beltline Highway to the north. On the east, the planning boundaries follow the city's municipal boundary that the city shares with the city of Fitchburg. To the south, the planning boundary follows Highway 18 and 151 and then continues along Cross Country Road. To the west, the planning boundaries follow the Ice Age Trail Junction area and then continues along High Point Road until the Beltline. There are approximately 16,000 housing units in this area, and population-wise, approximately 37,000 residents live here. Of those residents, 37% are BIPOC and Hispanic Latinx. Rebecca touched on this a little bit with the Southeast Area Plan presentation. So the Southeast and the Southwest area plans are the next two area plans that are being developed since the adoption of the city's planning framework that established this new approach to planning that allows for several benefits. The city is divided into these 12 discrete geographies, and that will form as the basis for area planning moving forward, and would provide a clear recommendation. So there'll be just one plan in place for that area that will provide clear guidance for decision making. And also this process will allow for reviewing older underlying plans and considering them for archiving. Also, these area plans cover the entire city. So there are certain areas that previously didn't have a plan in place will now get planning services. And then there are other areas that have multiple overlapping plans, but there'll be just one plan in place that will result in more clarity. Also, these plans will be updated more frequently on a 10-year basis. We'll have some consistent plan topics, and we're trying to strike a balance with this approach between coverage and level of detail. So because these area plans cover a larger geography, there'll be less level of detail, but more higher level recommendations and more enhanced coordination with other city initiatives, and also special emphasis on feedback from underrepresented groups. A little bit about the plan topics that Rebecca already touched upon in the Southeast area presentation. So these area plans are long-term plans that guide cities' decisions on physical aspects of the community and are structured around the 7 elements of the comprehensive plan. So we are using those 7 elements as the plan topics, which are listed here. One additional plan topic that both Southeast and Southwest area plans will be looking at is the community action strategy topic, because as Rebecca mentioned that like the Southeast area, the Southwest area also has areas that meet the eligibility criteria for receiving federal funding through the CDBG program. So there'll be this community action strategy component within the Southwest area plan process. So these community action strategy areas, so the map here is showing the census block groups within the Southwest area that meet the eligibility criteria. They have 50% more population within the block groups that are at or below 80% of the county median income that makes them eligible for receiving federal funding through the CDBG program. And these eligible areas are called community action strategy areas. And the map here is showing all the block groups within the Southwest area that meet those eligibility criteria. Of those block groups, we have decided to focus on these block groups that are shown on the map here because we feel like these are the areas that are of the greatest need within the Southwest area. What some of the things that the CDBG funding can help support with is help more capacity building, allow for a little more outreach and building some stakeholder relationships. Some of that funds could be used for investing in small scale physical improvements. And between the Southeast and the Southwest area, there's approximately $400,000 that could be used towards those physical improvements. Here's a map that's showing the comprehensive plans, generalized future land use recommendations for the Southwest area. So this the Southwest area is the primary land use is residential. So there's a lot of areas within the Southwest that you can see are designated as low residential. So the light yellow colors. There's some pockets of general commercial and employment uses along Watts Road and Schrader Road. There's also a commercial node at the Beltline and Verona Road interchange. There's some employment along Raymond Road, but this is largely a residential area. So a little bit about just an overview of the Southwest Area Plans timeline and the public participation process. As Rebecca mentioned, we are just getting started with the Southeast and the Southwest Area Plans, and right now seeking authorization to start these planning processes. What we have been doing is we have been gathering a little bit of background information until now and doing some data gathering, building some stakeholder lists, the stakeholders that we would like to reach through this planning process. And also, as we start the planning process, we'll like to do an RFP to call for community partners and engagement specialists. Towards the end of this year, roughly around the end of November, early December timeframe, we are hoping to kick off both the Southeast and the Southwest area plan processes with a series of public meetings and have a multi-agency open house. Rebecca also mentioned about the community survey that we are partnering with the UW PhD students to help us conduct a survey for both the Southeast and Southwest areas. And also use various engagement through neighborhood groups that are active in the community, neighborhood resource teams. There are 4 neighborhood resource teams within the Southwest area, and also reach out to some of the renters, apartments, and others to get input. Throughout next year, we'll start working on some draft recommendations and have our next series of public meetings. We're also going to be doing a second phase of the community survey during that time period. We're also partnering with the UW People's Program on urban planning and working with the Well Phillips Memorial High School students during the spring semester. We're also coordinating with Economic Development Division staff to do some outreach with the businesses. Rebecca mentioned like a business walk to help engage some of the businesses in the area. And then hoping that in the first quarter of 2026, go through both the plans going through the review and adoption process around that timeline. And I'm not going to repeat the slide. Rebecca already mentioned we are looking at the lessons learned from the West and the Northeast area plans and really trying to learn from those processes and really trying to improve this process, really try to educate people early on what these plans are and are not, set some expectations, really convey to the public what we are hearing from that with feedback summaries, improving our coordination with city agencies, using that open house format, which seemed to work well with the last 2 area plans, and continue to experiment and improve our public engagement methods. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair, and Kirsty and I will be available to answer questions.
Any questions for the team? Seeing none, I will be looking for a motion. Alder Ugair.
All right, I move the authorization of the Planning Division to lead the preparation of the Southwest Area Plan and adoption of the public participation plan included with the agenda materials.
And seconded by Commissioner Heck. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Moving on to agenda item 5, Legistar 85091, amending section 16.03 of the Mass and General Ordinances related to transportation demand management to clarify transportation demand management procedures, including adjusting parking ratios and removing some exceptions to TDM applicability. Megan, I believe we may have had someone registered for this item. Would it be appropriate to read them in now?
Yes, I can do that. We did have one person registered in support but not wishing to speak. This was Nicholas Davies in District 15. And we have no other registrants for this item.
Or,
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair. Your audio is just a second delayed.
sorry, do we have a staff presentation?
We do. Trent Schultz is here from the Department of Transportation.
Hello, Trent.
Hello, I am Trent Schultz, the Transportation Demand Management Coordinator here with the city, and I'm going to provide another the proposed amendments before you today. Just all over the place. My screen did not pull up. Can you see this screen here? Okay, so I'm going to provide an overview on the proposed amendments, but before I do that, I will sort of take a step back and refresh everyone on what TDM is. So the TDM ordinance was adopted in December of 2022 and took effect in June of 2023. And what the ordinance allows the city to do is to review new development, changes of use, so going from like restaurant to retail as an example, and then also sites with increased parking to see what those types of developments will do to provide amenities and infrastructure that encourage more sustainable transportation trips, such as taking the bus, biking, carpooling, and walking or rolling. And the TDM ordinance requires these types of developments to provide TDM plans, which require a certain amount of points that a project would have to provide specific measures to address some of the trips to and from the site to try to encourage fewer single occupancy vehicle trips to and from the site. And so some examples of TDM measures include providing secured bike storage for employees or tenants, providing free or subsidized transit passes, installing a B-cycle station near or on the property, and then also more programmatic things such as unbundling parking from rent or having parking cash out. And the last time I was here at Plan Commission speaking to the TDM ordinance was in November of 2023, and there were 3 areas of the proposed amendments. The first was to align uses subject to the TDM ordinance with those that are either permitted or conditional within the zoning code. And then the second was to clarify review procedures around the timing of when a TDM plan would be required. So that was based on a recommendation from city staff that didn't quite make it into the final adopted ordinance back in 2022. And then the last ordinance amendment back in November of 2023 was looking to modify the current public safety facility use exemption to instead exempt wholly city-owned properties. And that was the only amendment of the 3 that did not pass. And that was based on significant discussion at Plan Commission and also Transportation Commission. So since that time, almost a year, there have been quite a few TDM plans approved through the ordinance, and then also a few different sites in addition to that that were either not subject to the ordinance or are still working on getting their TDM plan approval, as well as a lot of analysis on a staff perspective and also taking feedback from applicants. So today I will cover 2 areas of proposed amendments. The first is to modify parking ratio calculations, and the parking ratio is really what determines TDM points for a specific project. So what an applicant, including a development team with architect, business owner, etc., what they need to do as far as providing different TDM measures. And then the second area is to remove several use exemptions. So going back to that public safety facility exemption, really focusing on whether certain exemptions should be removed from the ordinance or if they should be maintained. So the first area, as I mentioned, is to modify parking ratio calculations, which determine how many TDM points a specific project would need to meet. And this table here on this slide is specific to institutional and educational uses. And the parking ratio for those two uses is based on proposed parking to use-specific base parking. And use-specific base parking is really directly derived from zoning code parking minimums within MGO 28.141. So kind of stepping back a little bit from that table, TDM points are based on several factors. So the first is use. So within the TDM ordinance, projects are grouped into 4 use categories. So residential, employment, commercial, and institutional. And then they're assessed based on their scale. So for residential development, that would be how many dwelling units there are. And then for all other uses, that is really based on the square footage of tenant space. Location also plays a factor. So the further a project is away from the isthmus and high frequency transit, the more the TDM point requirements reduce. And then in general, the less parking a project has, the lower amount of TDM points there'd be required. So parking ratios differ between different use categories. So for residential, the parking ratio is parking stalls per dwelling unit. And for employment, it's parking stalls per 500 square feet of floor area. And then for commercial and institutional uses, the parking ratio is parking stalls per use-specific base parking. So those two, commercial and institutional, are really the focus of the proposed amendments before you, and really looking at the problems that using use-specific base parking has caused. So here are some examples of base parking, or those parking minimums within the zoning code, and I'll really go into the first bullet point there, which is a parking minimum of determined by zoning administrator. That is a parking minimum that is applicable to a couple different uses, including indoor recreation, which would be like a bowling alley or an axe throwing place. And it is problematic because of how it's applied. And so within the central area, so that's bounded by roughly Park Street to Blair Street, and then also all throughout the transit-oriented development overlay district, and then several other zoning districts, there is no parking minimum. So you could have a situation where a project is within the central area or within the TOD overlay, and zoning staff, if they're reviewing that project, would not have any sort of parking minimum. However, within the TDM ordinance, since I have to use the base parking or the parking minimums, I would have to ask zoning staff, based on the way that the code is written currently, to determine a parking minimum when they actually don't have to through the ordinance that they enforce. So it definitely creates an issue for staff as far as administering the parking ratios. And it also has proven to be something based on feedback that applicants, when they're filling out a TDM plan, have run into issues as far as how to determine what that base parking could be. So to address some of those concerns, the proposed changes would modify the parking ratio for both commercial and institutional uses to, instead of being parking stalls per use-specific base parking, be more standardized at parking stalls per 500 square feet of gross floor area. So as part of having those proposed changes out there on the table, we looked at how many projects that could impact, and with the over 30 TDM plans that we've approved so far in the year and change of the ordinance taking effect, roughly a third of those have been within commercial or institutional use categories. So the change before you all today would not have a small impact. It would definitely, be somewhat of a significant impact for commercial and institutional use projects. And we also really wanted to focus our effort and attention onto how any sort of change to that parking ratio would impact smaller projects where they're going from an office space to a dental clinic and maybe aren't putting in the amount of investment that a project that's demolishing a building and constructing a new 5-story mixed-use building would be doing. And so we really wanted to make sure that any type of change to the parking ratios for institutional and commercial uses would not overly impact some of those smaller tenant spaces. And then also trying to find a ratio change that would lead to the least amount of increase or decrease in the required TDM points. And so not really trying to, have a surprise change to the parking ratio that led to, more TDM points being required or a significant amount less. And with employment uses currently using that parking stalls per 500 square feet of gross floor area, it's definitely something that is not reinventing the wheel to use a parking ratio that's already in the ordinance and reviewed through other uses. So moving on to the next area of the proposed amendments is looking specifically at removing use exemptions. So the current use exemptions for commercial uses include daycares, nursery schools, animal daycares, and for institutional, that's K-8 public or private schools, institutions with campus master plans, which includes UW-Madison, public safety facilities, and place of worship. So in considering any sort of change to the use exemptions, we really wanted to look at how any change would impact the overall consistency or predictability of the ordinance. And what we found is that there are several related uses that are treated differently. So for example, animal daycare is an exempted use currently, but animal boarding is subject to TDM requirements. And there was actually a project that came through within the last 6 or so months that had both animal boarding and daycare. And so it definitely left a question in my mind and, in others who are working on this as far as how the ordinance could be, more evenly applicable. And then, there's other examples such as 3 projects that I've approved at private schools that had K through 12 education, where their 9th through 12th grade students and staff were subject to the TDM requirements, but K through 8 were not. And in looking at the TDM measures that those different projects selected, the majority of them were going to apply to the K through 8 grades as well. So it definitely seems like it could be something that addresses some of those gaps and improves the consistency of the ordinance. It would also, by removing exemptions, allow more sites to take into consideration different TDM measures. And considering we, just recently opened up BRT, it's definitely a great opportunity to really leverage that investment and have more sites consider different ways to get people out of their cars and into other modes and make it so, there's options out there. It's not just, situations where people have no choice but their car. And then looking at other cities with TDM ordinances, the vast majority of them do not have as extensive a list as we do as far as use exemptions. And really looking into the success of other cities who have had TDM ordinances for much longer than we have, it really is something that portions of our ordinance were based on theirs, but the specific use exemptions seem to be relatively unique in comparison to others. So within the staff report, there were several recommended removals for the current use exemptions. And I will say that we have been working on a racial equity and social justice analysis of both areas of the changes, and definitely want to highlight two specific use exemptions for further consideration, both here at Plan Commission today and at Transportation, and that is focusing on potentially removing daycare centers and nursery schools or not. And the other recommended uses to be removed from that use exemption list would include animal daycare facilities, K-8 schools, place of worship, and public safety facilities. The institutions with campus master plans exemption was not included in that recommended removal, mostly due to significant TDM related efforts going on within the UW-Madison campus right now, and also in reviewing several projects that have come up recently. It didn't seem like many of them had a lot of parking on site. So by no means is it a closed door on removing that. And so, staff, I would say, didn't necessarily feel comfortable with including that in the recommended use exemption removals, but could definitely, answer any questions related to why that was left out. So within our RESG, racial equity, social justice analysis of the impact of removing some of those exemptions, we do want to highlight that that being subject to the TDM ordinance does not necessarily mean that a site is required to receive TDM plan approval. And what that means is that by removing an exemption, it doesn't mean that every single place of worship will be subject to the TDM ordinance. It really depends on site-specific circumstances as far as how much parking they have and how big the building is. However, we did see that looking at different sites that were recently approved before the ordinance or during it, that small-scale change of use projects, so going from an office to a daycare, those types of sites seem to be impacted by the proposed changes more so than those that are new construction projects or larger tenant spaces. So to kind of elaborate on that point, I do have two site examples. So the first is a daycare that received approval in 2023. It's on Lean Road, a block or so away from East Washington Avenue. And it is a roughly 2,000 square foot tenant space. And it's about a quarter mile away from the most recent, or the nearest bus stop, which is at Portage Road and East Washington Avenue on the new Rapid Route A. And based on the amount of parking within the site, which is also a multi-tenant building, roughly 20 TDM points would be required. So that definitely is a pretty significant amount of TDM points required for such a small tenant space. And then comparing that to a similar site as far as the use, 2346 Winnebago Street, which is Red Caboose. It was approved in 2022 and is around 20,000 square feet. And it's sandwiched in between two BRT stations, one at 4th and East Wash and the other at Milwaukee and East Wash. And based on the size and the relative lack of parking, no TDM plan would be required. So I think these two examples definitely highlight what our RESG analysis came to, which is that considering the use exemptions, there definitely are maybe some unintended consequences that come with removing those exemptions. So I definitely think, I wanted to share that analysis with you all today. And with that, I feel comfortable opening it up to questions or any discussion on the proposed amendments.
Thank you, Trent. Do we have any questions for Trent? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. And thanks, Trent. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying on that last point. Your staff is still recommending approval of these changes, but with a sort of a caveat that we understand what the ResJ analysis had to say. And I guess that's it. That's kind of what you were summarizing there at the end. Am I right?
Yeah, I think, the staff report removed all the exemptions with the exception of institutions with campus master plans. And based on our ResG analysis, there were definitely some concerns about removing the daycare and nursery exemptions. And I've had conversations with other city staff that help to fund new daycares coming in. And so they also shared some of those same concerns. And so I definitely think, while I recommended within the staff report removal of all but institutions with campus master plans, I definitely think you all can focus on daycare centers and nursery schools in particular if, there's no concerns with removing those other ones.
Okay, well, one other question. Are there, let's say one of these smaller projects is that you're saying might be impacted and newly required to have a fair number of TDM points comes forward. Are there any methods for providing some reduction in those points otherwise, either through staff or plan commission or transportation commission action? Or I'm just trying to figure out how you can help somebody out.
Yep. So I do have the discretion to waive up to 5 TDM points. So that would be something that, does have some precedent. So far, out of the 33 sites that have approved TDM plans, I've approved 2 for that point reduction. I think the most I approved was 3. So I definitely think that's out there and could address some of those more problematic sites if, the removal of daycare centers and nursery schools isn't advanced.
Okay, thanks. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner McCahill.
Thanks. Just wanted to follow up on that. So the case you showed, Trent, where they'd be required to achieve 20 points, presumably that's because they would be proposing to provide a high number of parking spaces per square foot. And if that number were even a little bit lower, the number of points they would need to meet would also be, could be quite a bit lower, even on top of the 5 points that you might grant them.
That's correct. Yeah. So we would require in a situation where there's multiple tenant spaces within the same property to divvy up the parking stalls. That could be something that, specifically addresses or accounts for a smaller tenant space if there's, larger ones within the same building. But I definitely think it's a challenge for some of these more suburban development pattern sites that have a single story building with a lot of parking that's probably bigger than the building itself. So it definitely creates some inherent challenges. But I do think if it's a multi-tenant property, there are ways to divvy up the parking to maybe for that first tenant coming in through TDM to make it a little less on them, and then the property owner can prepare for future changes of use coming down the road.
Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Trent? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Heck.
Thanks. I'll move that we approve amending the section of MGO related to TDM to clarify the TDM management procedures, including adjusting parking ratios and removing some exceptions to TDM applicability as discussed in the staff report.
And to clarify, that would include all of the items in the staff report, including the daycare as
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have a second by Alder Ugair. Any discussion, Commissioner Heck?
I'll just briefly, it sounds like there is some avenue for relief in those somewhat problematic situations that Trent described. It seems like a little bit like we're streamlining things and trying to bring the ordinance more in line with other cities that have more experience. But we're also, putting a level of subjectivity in there, even though we are simultaneously removing other levels of subjectivity, I think, that we didn't want. But I think because of the fact that other cities have had success with this approach, I'm willing to endorse it.
Thank you. Commissioner Basine. Oh, I might have unmuted you at the same time. There you go.
Thanks, Nicole. I am not sure if I should have asked this question earlier, but I am curious. I know, as somebody who doesn't necessarily know what different points actually equal to for somebody, for say like a child care center or something, I know there was mentioned that there could be a reduction of points, but if there's a child care center that would have these new points, what would that actually translate into in terms of what they would have to do to meet requirements?
Yeah, so it really is up to them, but some examples could include providing bus passes to all their employees or having an emergency ride home program where people that don't have a car that they can drive to and from work, that they would have a guaranteed ride home with or through their employer. And just for those two examples in particular, complimentary transit passes, that's worth 7 TDM points, and then the emergency ride home program, that's 2. So that's, if we just say that a hypothetical daycare is going to require 20 TDM points, that's almost half. And that's not even mentioning that there are some automatic measures. So if a project is within a quarter mile of high frequency transit, so this one on Lean Road would qualify for that. That's another 5 points there. So that would only be 6 points that they need to provide. If it's 20 required.
To your question, or do you have further questions?
Nicole, I had a follow-up question. Is there a sense of how many people would, if this went into place, how many people would be affected who right now have exemptions would then be impacted?
I think that's a little difficult to say, but specific to daycares and nursery schools, there seem to be about 5 or so that have been reviewed with or approved within the last couple of years, and I think 2 of which would have been subject to the TDM ordinance. So there's those, and then animal daycare. I think there have been 3 that have come through. So definitely not insignificant, but it's not going to be necessarily every new daycare coming in is going to be subject to TDM. Just with some of those examples, such as Red Caboose, which is a new building that wouldn't, or newer building that wouldn't have needed TDM if it was built today. And I've seen a couple recent proposals where they were modifying an existing building and putting in a significant amount of money to do that, And based on the parking that they were proposing, they wouldn't have needed to provide a TDM plan just because the parking on site compared to the size of the building isn't enough to meet that TDM plan threshold.
Thank you.
That we have a motion and a second for the recommendations in the staff report. Any further discussion? If not, we will move to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Commissioner Basine, your hand is raised. Is that to object or just from? Okay. All right, seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Trent. All right, we will move on to our public hearings. Agenda item 8, Legistar 84824, 310 to 322 East Washington Avenue, Alder District 2. Consideration of an alteration to an approved PD SIP for a 10-story mixed-use building containing approximately 16,000 square feet of institutional space and 130 apartments to reduce the number of off-street automobile parking stalls and remove individual balconies for the apartments. First, we will hear from planning staff.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Plan Commission. Just briefly, item number 8 is a request to reduce 2 aspects of an approved mixed-use project that was before the Plan Commission in January of 2023, redeveloping the St. John's Lutheran Church site at 310 through 322 East Washington Avenue. The Plan Commission and Common Council approved construction of a 10-story mixed-use building containing approximately 16,000 square feet of institutional space, 10,000 square feet of which would be for St. John's Lutheran Church. The other 6,000 square feet for community service providers associated with a 130 apartment development on floors 2 through 10 of that building. There are 2 requests before the Plan Commission tonight. The first is to reduce the number of on-site automobile parking stalls for the project from 63 to 10, while maintaining the bike parking that was originally approved with 131 bikes within the building and 20 bikes on the exterior of the site. The applicant and property owner are also asking for approval of an alteration that would remove most of the balconies and patios from the approved building. Speaking first to the parking, as I mentioned, the 10-story mixed-use building was approved with 63 automobile stalls on 2.5 levels of parking beneath the footprint of the building, with an access from Hancock Street. The proposed parking represented a maximum parking ratio of 0.48 stalls to dwelling units, bearing in mind that the 2022 letter of intent for the project noted that some of the indoor parking would be used by St. John's Lutheran Church, which again was or is approved to occupy 10,000 square feet on the first floor of the building. The applicant's letter of intent at that time indicated that that was approximately 73% of the estimated parking demand was being satisfied by those 63 stalls. With the request to reduce it to 10, the staff will note that the site is well served by Metro Transit, including both the now fully operational BRT A line, the east-west BRT, as well as the future north-south BRT B line. Both pass the site along East Washington Avenue with stops on the Capitol Square and at Blair Street. There are also non-BRT metro lines a couple of blocks both to the north and south of the site, as well as on the Capitol Square. As I mentioned, the applicant isn't proposing to change the amount of bike parking provided. And the site is technically in the central area where there is no minimum parking stalls specified for the development. However, the Traffic Engineering Division has submitted comments expressing concerns about the reduction in parking, noting that the area where the proposed development is located already experiences a high degree of parking, delivery, and rideshare pressure and congestion. And staff also notes that the project is not currently eligible for residential parking permits pursuant to MGO section 12.138. The project team has noted that they have been in contact with the parking division about potentially leasing spaces in the Capitol Square North Garage. However, no information on the number of stalls or who would have access to those stalls have been provided. The Plan Commission, in considering the alteration, should consider whether or not the plan development still complies with the standard number 2 for plan developments related to traffic and parking demands and the improvements that are designed to meet them. Secondly, the removal of balconies. Approximately 30% of the 130 dwelling units in the approved project were to have either a balcony or patio. The proposed alteration also seeks approval to remove all but 2 of the patios from the project. There are 2 patios that are adjacent to a common patio that's available to all residents off of a common room on the second floor. That patio is remaining, and then there are 2 unit patios that are adjacent to it that would remain. The other patios and balconies in the project, however, would be removed. Staff will note that there is a standard related to the consideration of whether adequate, usable, and suitably located open space and recreational amenities is provided for a planned development. And the Plan Commission, in considering that aspect of the alteration, should give consideration to that standard, which is 2F in the plan development standards. In closing, the proposed alteration was originally proposed as a staff level alteration. However, given the amount of parking reduction being sought, as well as the elimination of the open space, staff felt that it would be appropriate for the alteration to be considered by the Plan Commission. And in preparation for this meeting, we have sent notices to property owners and occupants within 200 feet of 310 and 322 East Washington Avenue, notifying them of this meeting. That concludes my staff report, and I'm happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. For the public hearing, we do have registrants, so I will open the public hearing. Megan, can you read the registrants into the record?
I can. The first speaker registered is Michael Chabadi, registered in support and wishing to speak, located in District 2 on East Washington.
Hi there. Can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Good evening. My name is Michael Chabadi, and I'm a resident of 408 East Washington Ave, which is actually next door to the proposed development. And while I wasn't able to speak in support for the development when it was initially proposed and approved, I'm glad to see that the developers are demonstrating flexibility and are reaffirming their intent to create so much affordable housing, despite some of the economic headwinds they mentioned. Our city is projected to grow by over 100,000 residents before 2050. We need more than 7,000 additional residential units to be built per year to keep pace with this growth, according to the Capital Times just last week. At a time when students and others struggle to find affordable housing, this project is a necessity. I'm similarly encouraged to see this proposed in such a lively area of town. As part of the neighborhood, we enjoy everything the Isthmus has to offer, and so will the future residents of this development. And I couldn't agree more with what city staff said regarding the area being well serviced by public transportation. And I do feel there are ample parking options nearby, despite what sounded like some potential disagreement there. So while these plan modifications are certainly unfortunate, they shouldn't stand in the way of the project. And in summary, I support the proposed plan revisions. Thank you.
Okay, the next registered speaker is Mark Binkowski, registered in support and wishing to speak, registered at Farwell Drive.
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. And I sent a presentation around to Tim, if he's able to share that. So my name is Mark Minkowski. I am a developer that has been working with St. John's for the last 4 years on this project, which is hard to imagine. So Tim, if you could jump to the next slide. So just as a brief reminder for everybody, this project is led by St. John's, who's been on the site for 165 years and really is driven by their mission to create affordable housing in the heart of downtown Madison. So of the 130 units, 110 or 85% of them will be set aside for those earning less than 60% of AMI, including 26 units for those the lowest income levels of 30% AMI. So really the driver for this project is to create the maximum amount of affordable housing at the lowest levels of affordability. And so with that, the two changes being proposed and requested is really just necessitated by the construction costs and the economics of the projects and really trying to do what we can to make the project feasible. So if you can jump to the next slide, Tim. As Tim mentioned, the first change is the removal of the balconies. 4 units per floor, effectively on the typical upper floor plan, had those balconies. This change has more of a financial impact than you might think with the structural slab and doors out to those balconies. And if you can jump to the next 2 slides, Tim, you can see the renderings. Really, the removal of the balconies, I think, actually improves the overall aesthetic of the building. It, greatly simplifies the exterior design. We are creating, as you can see here, a large outdoor terrace surrounded by green roof on the second floor. That's a common amenity to the whole building. And so there's still available outdoor space for residents. And it also removes any, preferential units that have balconies over those that don't. So I think this is, although being driven by cost saving measures, I think in a number of ways actually is a benefit to the overall project. And then the next slide shows the previous plan iteration had parking that sloped down to get underneath the residential lobby on Hancock Street. And the parking with this small site, you can see the arrows, all of the trays are sloped. And so it is very expensive parking to build on such a small site, all underground, obviously. And really, it just comes down to the economic realities of the project. And so the elimination of that parking
Excuse me, Mark.
is...
I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to alert the chair that the 3 minutes had ended, which is the standard for. Yep.
So just if you flip to the next slide, that's the last slide. It's really just showing that we're going to one flat tray and eliminating the underground sloping parking, which you can, kind of, I think, tell the cost savings that are achieved by that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that any of the commissioners might have. Thank you.
Okay. The next registrant is Peter Beeson at Gorham Street, registered in support and available to answer questions. Peter is representing St. John's Lutheran Church. And the last registrant is Nicholas Davies from District 15 on Richardson Street, registered in support and not wishing to speak. And that is all I have, Chair.
Any questions for any of our registrants? Commissioner McCahill.
Thanks. Question for Mark. I'm interested in the concerns that traffic engineering raised about deliveries and rideshare vehicles in particular. could you speak at all to where deliveries would occur and what sort of the stacking for rideshare vehicles looks like on either block?
Happy to, Chris. So the primary residential lobby entrance is on Hancock Street. And so there is space between where the entrance to the parking is and the corner on East Washington. Hancock Street is one way, just as a reminder to everybody. So the idea is that our hope would be to work with traffic engineering to have some stall or some signed areas in front of the residential lobby there on Hancock Street that would be reserved for, short-term loading, unloading, delivery type of access. And so the hope would be that that could be the primary point for those types of uses.
Thanks. Can you remind me what the situation on East Wash is now, just because there's probably been a lot of change since BRT? Is there any parking on East Wash now that you know of?
I don't believe don't quote me on this because I'm with the change to BRT. I don't know if there is parking in front of the building on East Wash now after BRT or not, Chris. Honestly,
That's okay.
I'm not sure what the current situation is.
I see Stephanie can weigh in later probably, so that's fine. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for the registrants? Commissioner Heck.
Can you give us any updates on maybe negotiations with the city concerning using the nearby city parking garage? Has there been any change on that front?
No change. We have not been in extensive negotiations with the city, and my conversations with Matt when we initially began discussing this, they noted that the Capitol Square North ramp has significant vacancy in it right now. I think there was a couple of hundred stalls or permits potentially that were available. So that is, call it a block and a half, 2 blocks away. And so that would seem to be the most obvious resource for parking that, the building could secure in advance and then lease to tenants directly. What number and amount we're still kind of working through what we think that would be, but that seems to be an available and fairly obvious parking resource.
So you're saying that the nearest lot is maybe less available because of capacity?
Well, I think Brayton is the nearest, and but
that probably
not counting on that. Exactly. So that's why we're looking at the Cap Square North.
Okay, and so that's that. The one on East Mifflin is that's not Cap Square North, is it? I can't remember the name of that one.
Yeah.
Now. Oh, that's the one. Okay. Mifflin and Webster.
The one Mifflin and Butler and Webster.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's Cap Square North.
Okay, and then just one other question about parking. Has there been a discussion about who will use the 10 spaces that you will have?
No, we would intend to make those available to residents. It would have to be on a first come, first served basis, just to make sure that everything is equitable, not, reserving those for specific units or specific income levels. So, that's how we would intend to allocate those.
And for the people visiting or working on the first floor?
Right now, the congregation members, there's very limited on-site parking. So the congregation members are used to utilizing street parking for Sunday services. And so even when we were, proposing the larger ramp of 65 stalls or so, The intent was never to have that as a available parking resource for the congregation members, but they would continue parking on, the street or in nearby ramps as they have been with the existing site.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Heck. I do have one question for Mark as well, just to follow up on the question about loading zones and deliveries and related to discussion about the congregation parking. In terms of drop-offs for service on Sundays and other events, do you anticipate that would have to happen at the same location on Hancock, or are there any other options?
It would either be on Hancock or along East Washington. Again, just depending on what that condition for the frontage on East Washington ends up being after BRT. The access to the first floor St. John space is along East Washington, so that would certainly be the most direct and convenient and keep traffic out of the neighborhood. But again, we'll just have to see how that develops after the advent of BRT and any other changes the city might be making.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Are there any other questions for registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Do we have questions of staff? Commissioner McCahill.
Thanks. So I guess I have a question for Stephanie. What's the situation on East Wash now?
There is no parking left. So BRT took all the parking stalls away. And then as you noted, Brayton Lot is gone. So that's also reduced it in that area. So the side streets would be the only option.
Okay, so obviously there is going to have to be some creative use of the available space for deliveries and drop-offs. And I know we're kind of in the process of figuring out curb management. So is this something that, what are your thoughts on how this could play out over the next year or so and how to make that work?
Well, yeah, the curb management program will take probably 2 years before we fully implement. So it's going to be a while. Yeah, we are, as part of that process, we are looking at, how to identify rideshare locations, loading zone locations, and how to balance that with residential permit and other access needs. So, this area, it does have residential permit. It is in the snow emergency zone. So we'll have to figure out, how many permits are in that location, how many are being, distributed, and what type of loading would be available, the hours. So depending on the needs of the new building.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Chair Solheim, just as an FYI, I think I saw that you called on Alder Duncan, but we couldn't hear you, just as an FYI. Yes.
Yes. Sorry. Alder Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask the other apartment buildings there on East Washington, what is the residential parking ratio in those apartment complexes?
So the newest building does not qualify for residential permits. So it's all the existing buildings or, the homes that have been transitioned into apartments. So it is a pretty large residential permit area. So each area, is multiple blocks worth. So the newest building over there, though, does not have residential permit access.
Are there any other questions of staff? Any other questions of staff? If there are no further questions, I will be looking for a motion. Alder Ugair.
Thank you, Chair. Finding that the proposed alterations are consistent with the specific implementation plan approved by the Common Council and the plan development standards, that the request to reduce the number of on-site automobile parking stalls and the elimination of most of the residential balconies be approved.
Seconded by Alder Field. Any discussion on the motion, Alder Ugair?
I think we've generally found that this is a very worthwhile project in terms of the new availability of the full range of affordable units in the city and in this particular area, that it's worth moving forward, and that the opportunity, the likelihood of obtaining some additional authorized parking and Capitol North ramp makes this highly feasible.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Commissioner Sanders.
Thank you. I'll just also speak to the standard regarding the outdoor space. I appreciate that they're still going to maintain that shared outdoor balcony space, that green space. So just wanted to mention that I also find that condition to be met.
Thank you, Commissioner. Seeing no further discussion, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. We're moving on to agenda item 9, Legistar 84825, 2121 Jefferson Street and 1007 Edgewood Avenue, Alder District 13. Consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 2 single-family residences. And we'll start with a presentation from staff. Tim?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. The request before you at 2121 Jefferson and 1007 Edgewood are requests to demolish 2 single-family residences. The one at 1007 Edgewood, constructed in 1909, and the one at 2121 Jefferson, constructed in 1905. Both considered to be contributing structures in the Wingra Park National Register Historic District. The request before you is a demolition permit to demolish both of those houses. Following demolition of the houses, the applicants intend to construct a new single-family home on the site. The new single-family residence is a permitted use and not subject to Plan Commission approval. In reviewing the demolition permit request against the standards for same, staff will note that at its August 5th meeting, the Landmarks Commission recommended to the Plan Commission that both of the buildings have historic value given their status as contributing structures in the Wingra Park National Historic District. And that standard 4 for demolition permit standards requires that the Plan Commission consider any recommendations submitted by the Preservation Planner and the Landmarks Commission. Staff believes, other than standard 4, that the standards for demolition permit can be approved, but urges the Plan Commission to give careful consideration to standard 4, noting that the Plan Commission has approved projects that got a finding of historic value by the Landmarks Commission in the past, but that it has also recommended against other demolitions with the same finding. With that, I would be happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We do have registrants, so I will open the public hearing. And Megan, can you read the registrants into the record?
I can, and Chair, if you would indulge me, I will just let all the registrants know that when you have 1 minute left in your remaining time, I'll put this sign up, and when your 3 minutes is up, I'll put this sign up. So you can look out for me, and the chair can help with that as well. Our first registered speaker is Stephen Bruns, registered from Milwaukee, registered in support and wishing to speak.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Stephen.
Right. My name is Stephen. I'm with Bruns Architecture. We've been hired by the owners of the property to help them with their project. I understand I have 3 minutes to talk. I will do my best. First, I'd like to say that as a local architect, and specifically in reference to the work we do in my design firm, demolishing an existing structure is not our normal response. We generally favor adaptive reuse and would pursue that avenue, if not for the multiple conflicts with these structures and the owner's sustainable goals for their multi-generational family. Let me start by saying that we understand the statement of purpose in the zoning ordinance, and we feel that our request is consistent with the health, prosperity, safety, and welfare of the people. We believe our application outlines how and why we meet the 7 standards of approval. Tonight, I'll try to focus just on standard 4. Back before 1990, someone had the idea to nominate the Winger Park neighborhood to the National Park Service to become a historic district. The goal of establishing a district involves including as many examples in the neighborhood as possible. Of course, they put their best foot forward and listed just about every house in the neighborhood. That was 297 homes. The only homes that were excluded were built before 1891 and after 1940, and also a few that were indicated as having unsympathetic alterations. Alterations as simple as replacing siding or windows led to a project being considered unsympathetic and therefore potentially non-contributing. What we can tell you today is that some point between 1990 and about a year ago, when our clients purchased the houses, much of the historic fabric was stripped from them. They've been poorly clad in vinyl siding. The original windows have been removed and replaced with bad vinyl windows. And most of the interior materials and elements that created the historic charm are now gone. We are confident that if the nomination were being submitted today, these houses would have to be considered non-contributing. I suspect that I'm running short on time, so I'll try to wrap it up. These 2 houses were average examples of a well-repeated style in the neighborhood. They're not a high example like the Larson House, which has earned its own historic designation. Instead, these were common representations of the ubiquitous 4-square and Queen Anne style, of which there were 22 and 53 examples respectively. So it's not lost on us that these houses do not carry their own historic designation. It's only their association with the larger ambition of the district that led to us discussing this tonight. I hope that helps us illustrate our point.
Thank you, Stephen.
The next registrant is Kurt Steggy from Cambridge Road in Madison, registered in opposition and wishing to speak, also representing the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation.
Good evening. I'm Kurt Steggy, co-chair of the Advocacy Committee of the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation. I'm here to offer comments regarding an understandable yet highly unsupported proposal to demolish 2 contributing buildings to the Winger Park National Register Historic District. These 2 structures are across Edgewood Avenue from the Edgewood campus. The 2 buildings were built in the first decade of the 20th century to house Sinsinawa Dominican nuns and priests who served the Sacred Heart Academy at Edgewood, which now encompasses Edgewood High School, Edgewood Campus School, and Edgewood College. Nuns resided in one of the buildings as late as 1988. The Landmarks Commission concluded that the two buildings have historic value and assigned them a red light status in terms of a demolition request. As noted in the staff report, the recommendation of the Landmarks Commission is not binding on the Plan Commission, which is the decision maker relative to the demolition proposal. However, the Landmarks recommendation must be given significant weight by the Plan Commission rather than ignored. Although it was not cited by the Landmarks Commission, the buildings also have historic value as providing living quarters to the religious order that serve the neighboring educational institutions, an important fact in Madison's history. Each building is eminently susceptible to rehabilitation as single-family residence. No evidence has been provided to the contrary. Applicants impugn the status of both buildings as contributing to the National Historic District. I'd like to direct your attention to page 7 of the narrative portion of the National Register nomination for Winger Park. There it says that exterior alterations, such as replacement windows and vinyl siding, quote, are typical of older residential neighborhoods and do not compromise the integrity of the Winger Park Historic District. Secondly, preservation planner Heather Bailey has also concluded, quote, there has been no change to the contributing designation. I also wish to draw your attention to page 4 of the staff report, which states, quote, from the submitted information, staff is not aware of significant structural issues. The key things here are that both buildings are contributing to the historic district. They are in good condition. The applicants have failed to supply evidence in support of their contention that the buildings no longer qualify as contributing buildings, and no evidence that they are in unsafe condition. No evidence that moving the two houses is not an option. The demolition proposed ignores the requirements for approving demolitions as specified in Madison General Ordinance 28.185. The proposal does not want.
That is the end of your available time. Thank you.
The next registered speaker is John Standridge on Edgewood Avenue, registered in support and wishing to speak.
Hi, John Standridge, and I live just south of the two buildings, and we've been here for 48 years. And I've been active in neighborhood activities for most of those 48 years. And I want to say that I support the proposal for the demolition and the replacement with a single-family owner-occupied situation. Both houses are sort of nondescript and really in my opinion, don't add much to the character of the neighborhood. And I just want to go on record here urging you to support demolition of the two properties. Once the two properties are combined, the lot would be the same size as my lot, which is only 40 by 160. So even with the two subdivision lots created into one lot, it's not a very big lot. But we do, as next door neighbors, support the demolition.
The next registered speaker is Jean Parks on Chamberlain Avenue, registered in opposition and wishing to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jean.
Hi, I'd like to voice opposition to the proposed demolition of these two homes. City staff and the Landmarks Commission described both houses as contributing resources to the Winger Park National Register District. Yeah, the homes are old, but I'm sure they have lots of life left in them. They are in fact properties that are eligible for federal historic tax credits for updates and improvements. These places are valued as contributing historic resources, and they have potential. I'm guessing that these two homes are some of the most affordable in Vilas. the near west neighborhood. I think it would be a mistake to demolish two modest, relatively affordable homes that have tax credit potential and then replace them with a very expensive single-family residence. In my opinion, there are plenty of $1 million plus homes in Vilas. We don't need to create another one at the expense of these two homes on the corners of Edgewood and Jefferson. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
Our next registrant is Rick Chandler at Ottawa Trail, registered in opposition, wishing to speak, also representing Madison Trust for Historic Preservation.
Good evening. I'm Rick Chandler, president of the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation, with more than 500 members throughout the city. We oppose the approval of a demolition permit, and we've submitted a letter. The applicant has not met the standards for approval set forth in section 28.1859C of the ordinances. And the applicant's argument for the permit has several very serious misstatements. These houses are listed as contributing houses to a historic district. The applicant says they should not be listed simply because they have vinyl siding. This is flatly wrong, according to the city preservation planner. She says many houses have been rehabbed and still qualify as contributing houses. She says these houses are still able to convey their historic associations and retain their historic integrity. Under Standard 4, the Plan Commission is required to seriously consider the recommendations of the Preservation Planner and the Landmarks Commission, and they clearly recommend against demolition. Standard 6 is not met. Standard 6 says the Plan Commission should consider the condition of the buildings and look at any building inspection and fire department reports. The applicant says the houses are structurally unsound. This is wrong. There are no negative city reports. The applicant has produced no home inspection reports showing any structural problems. The photos in the file show two houses in good condition. Staff says they're not aware of any structural issues. Finally, Standard 7 and the statement of purpose in the ordinances say the Plan Commission should consider whether demolition is consistent with several factors, including preservation of historic buildings and the welfare of the city. Demolition would remove two houses that contribute to a historic district and replace them with a much larger house that would not fit in. Demolition would remove two average size houses, which can be afforded by middle-class families, and replace them with one large house that's unaffordable for most families. There would be a net loss of housing stock. There would not even be an overall gain in assessed property value, since the two existing houses together would likely be assessed at roughly the same level as the one house that would replace them. So the ordinance has set up a sequence for review. Standard 4, do the houses contribute to Madison's historic value, which the ordinances say should be preserved? The answer is yes. Standard 6, do the houses have significant structural problems? No, they don't. Standard 7, will demolition produce net benefits for the city? No, we would have a net loss of housing stock and lose two mid-range historic houses. Under the Madison ordinances that must be applied here, the demolition permit should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
We have Caitlin Wanks, which I believe is the property owner at 2121 Jefferson Street, is available to answer questions. And we have two additional registrants, Lynn Bjorkman, registered in opposition, not wishing to speak, and Arnold Allen, and also registered in opposition and not wishing to speak. And that is it, Chair.
Thank you, Megan. Do we have any questions for our registrants? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I have a question for Stephen Bruns, if I'm saying that correctly. Bruns?
Yeah, Bruns, yes.
Bruns, okay. Stephen, I saw some somewhat conflicting information about the two homes. I know they're clad in vinyl siding, but in some places I read the opinion that the wooden siding underneath that had been removed. Can you clarify what's under the vinyl siding?
Well, frankly, we can't. We haven't removed that siding. We've only been able to observe it from the exterior. We can tell you that the original windows have been removed from both structures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And typically, though, as I recall, in your experience, maybe you'll agree that the wooden siding is probably underneath the vinyl siding. Usually, they just clad it, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That was my question.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Heck. Any other questions for our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there any questions for staff? Any questions for staff? If there are none, I am looking for a motion. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I will move that I've got to get the language right. I will move that we deny the application for a demo permit to demolish the 2 single-family residences at 2121 Jefferson Street and 1007 Edgewood Avenue.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner McCahill has the second. Is there, would you like to discuss your motion, Commissioner?
Yes, please. Please. I agree that the standard 4 is the primary consideration here. I agree that this is a contributing building, and that the fact that it's has vinyl siding and different windows, as mentioned, is not something that would disqualify it from being a contributing building. And I agree with the preservation planner who mentioned that in her input. Therefore, standard number 7 is not met due to the fact that standard number 4 is not met. And honestly, as we've discussed even at our last meeting, when we approved the demolition of a contributing building in a different National Historic District, the condition of the building and the placement of the building and the context makes these situations unique. And in this situation, it's different than the one from last week near State Street, because these buildings do seem to be in a perfectly livable condition and fairly easily renovated if someone were to choose to do that. The previous instance, I think the information that was provided to us clearly showed that the buildings were in very rough shape. And in addition, I find the context of these to be important in that they're in the historic district adjacent to many other historic structures and across the street from Edgewood, rather than a kind of a lone building hanging off the edge of the Mansion Hill National Historic District as last week. So I find this to be a different situation, and that these buildings can be saved and should not be torn down. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, we will move on to the public hearing for items 13 and 14, which will be considered together as one public hearing. Agenda item 13, Legistar 85055, creating section 28 of MGO to change the zoning of property located at 702 to 750 University Row and 5119 Silvertree Run from PD to amended PD, and creating section 28 to approve an SIP, Alder District 19. And agenda item 14, Legistar 84689, approving a certified survey map of property owned by the University of Wisconsin Hospitals and Clinics Authority and GI Clinic LLC, located at 702 to 750 University Row and 5119 Silvertree Run, Alder District 19. And we will kick it back to Tim for a presentation.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Plan Commission. Items 13 and 14 involve a request to construct a 4-story, 189,000 square foot addition to the existing 67,292 square foot UW Health Digestive Health Clinic located at 750 University Row at the southwestern corner of University Avenue. The proposed 4-story addition will extend southerly along University Row, and to its south, the applicants are proposing construction of a standalone 4-level, approximately 790 stall parking facility to serve the expanded medical office clinic and building. The proposal before you is both a request to amend the general development plan for the University Crossing Plan development, first approved in 2011. The applicant is also seeking approval of a specific implementation plan for the proposed 4-story clinic addition and the standalone parking structure. Finally, the applicants are also proposing to redivide lots 1 through 3 of the University Crossing subdivision into 2 lots. The first lot for the proposed clinic and parking structure, the second for a 100 to 110 unit 4-story multifamily dwelling that is conceptually shown south of the parking structure and Silvertree Run in the proposed amended general development plan. The standards for consideration include the standards for zoning map amendments, as well as the standards for approval for plan development districts. A major alteration to a general development plan, such as the one that's before the Plan Commission, is considered both a zoning map amendment as well as an amendment to the plan development district. The site is located in Urban Design District number 6, and the Plan Commission should also take note of the recommendation and actions of the Urban Design Commission on September 11th. And finally, the proposed development site is partially located within the Transit-Oriented Development Overlay District, as outlined in Section 28.104 of the zoning code. As the Plan Commission considers the project, the development team is seeking relief from 3 specific provisions of the TOD overlay using the Plan Development Zoning District. First, the project is seeking relief from the requirement that at least 30% of the primary street-facing building facades be set back no more than 20 feet from the primary street, and that buildings occupy at least 30% of the primary street frontage. In this case, both the clinic addition and the parking structure will be located beyond the 20-foot setbacks from University Row, which is the primary abutting street in the case of the proposed construction. With the clinic expansion being set back over 38 feet from University Row, and most of the parking structure being set back 42 feet beyond a landscaped area between the street-facing facade of that structure and University Row. The setback for the clinic addition is primarily owing to the need to accommodate automobile infrastructure for the addition between the building and street. The applicants also note that there are some angles of the street versus angles of the rectilinear building that are causing the building to be set back more than the 20 feet that the TOD overlay would otherwise require. So two factors contributing to that setback, including automobile infrastructure between the building and street, which is generally not allowed by the TOD overlay. And finally, the proposed parking structure in TOD is required to integrate active uses along at least 50% of the primary street-facing facade at the first floor. However, the proposed parking structure, as noted on the attached plans, includes no uses in the parking structure other than parking. It's worth noting from a procedural standpoint that the Plan Development District does allow for the applicants to seek relief to TOD overlay requirements similar to the relief that the PD District affords for the general regulations and supplemental regulations enumerated in the zoning code, which would be applicable if this was a conventionally zoned non-PD development. In reviewing the project, the Plan Commission is asked to make specific findings if it is going to approve the project, that the project is consistent with the community mixed use recommendations for the site in the comprehensive plan, and that it should specifically state why relief would be appropriate to the provisions of the TOD zoning overlay. So that concludes the staff report. I'm happy to answer questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Tim. We do have registrants, so I will open the public hearing. Megan, and I do believe we had some pooled time.
Yes, we do have the applicants requesting to pool their time. I will read all of the applicants into the record, and then we can proceed with the pooled time. The first registrant is Michael McKay, representing UW Health, registered in support, wishing to speak. Second registrant, Jen Voigt, representing West Johnson Street, I believe also with UW Health, registered in support, wishing to speak. Jenny Eschner, representing University Row Clinic, registered in support. Detmar Bassner, representing Krupp General Contractors, registered in support. And Dan Day, representing the GI Clinic, is registered as available to answer questions. The applicants have requested that Michael McKay and Jen Voigt are able to pool their time for a total of 9 minutes.
Hello, this is Jen Voigt. Tim, are you able to share our presentation? Thanks very much. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. Speaking on behalf of the development team, which includes Krupp Construction, UW Health, and I'm Jen Voigt from EOA Architects, we're proposing a significant update to a previously approved PUD, which you see on the red line, as well as an SIP for the site shown in orange above to include both a clinic building and a parking structure. Next slide, please. The majority of the existing SIP site is a surface parking lot, which, while convenient, does not necessarily add to the density nor the character of a thriving mixed-use neighborhood. This project presents a golden opportunity to increase the density in the spirit of the original PUD. The existing building, the Digestive Health Center from UW Health, has a clinical need to expand services and offerings at this site, including specialty and primary care clinics, diagnostics, and urgent care. The expanded clinic will be a regional destination, serving both local Madisonians as well as patients up to 90 miles away in a 5-county radius. The existing building has a canopy with vehicular drop-off pickup facing the surface parking lot. Up to 100 outpatients per day are discharged via wheelchair by staff from this entry post-procedure into the care of a transport van, a family member, or a friend driving them home. They're not allowed to drive. This programmatic requirement continues to be critical to patient safety at this location and as we add on to the building and reorient the main entry. Next slide, please. We were with you over a year ago with a programmatically similar project that did receive the endorsement of this Plan Commission in 2023. You're of course wondering why we're back. So to replace the existing surface parking and provide for new demand, we previously proposed 3 stories of underground parking underneath the clinic to address that need. Ultimately, that parking scenario came up against insurmountable cost and constructability challenges as we went to market. Specifically, the depth of the parking combined with the proximity to University Row created underpinning needs with the public road. The water table was 2 stories higher than the bottom of the structure. Forever costs were devoted to pumping water out and protecting the wellhead district. And the existing storm sewer easement being relocated to the south in the previous iteration meant we were literally fighting an uphill battle as we tried to keep water moving down while the grade was moving up. So we spent many months studying scenarios to make that previous option work as approved, but ultimately it could not. We do want to thank Alder Ugair, Plan Commission, and city staff for their stewardship through this continuing process, which led us back here more than a year later with this version 2.0 project depicted in this site plan, reimagining the parking as an above-grade parking structure to the south. Next, please. For access, the vehicular drop-off does continue to be a critical component of UW Health's regional destinations, which this is. Patients often arrive via unplanned transfer from nursing homes and other supported care environments, and they need help disembarking, getting walkers, wheelchairs set up, and we just don't want that activity happening on the public street. It would not be safe. Given the predominance of this activity, it's being situated front and center and combined with the pedestrian, bus, bike entries into a single visible main entry, single visible spot, which is ideal in terms of an equitable patient experience for all. In order to accommodate the new Metro bus stop shown with the purple dot, we have widened the green space buffer between the street and the drop-off, creating, again, a safer and more visually separate experience. The primary entry to the parking structure continues to be off the roundabout. Staff will only use this entry, and we anticipate the majority of our repeat visitors will as well. All traffic will exit the facility to the south through the roundabout. Next, please. As Tim mentioned, we are asking for a few TOD exception requests. We don't take asking for these requests lightly. It's only with our patient safety at the forefront that we ask for them. Specifically, the vehicular drop-off between the primary street and the facade. Again, this is a programmatic driver of UW Health's regional facilities. And then again, as Tim alluded to, the presence of that drop-off led to the setback due to both that drop-off's presence, as well as you can kind of see how University Row is angling away from the existing building at the top of the page. So while at the kind of top where we connect, we're close to the street. As it angles away, we get farther from the street. And then the structure has a similar condition as you go to the south and you meet up with the roundabout, which is wider, to get a regular parking structure. So both of those 2 exceptions were approved when we brought this project to you last year in 2023. And then the third one this time is the active use of the parking structure. Again, I think the spirit of the TOD is that these need to be considered separate, but as, a combined building, we are looking at creating as much of the active use as we can in the clinic building. But we really want to prioritize safety and visibility of the first floor of the parking structure, as well as we have a huge ADA parking need for this project. So prioritizing those spaces on the first floor towards the front of the building for our handicap users is, what's getting them anywhere close to proximus to their destination. As mentioned in the staff report, the UDC did find the proposed TOD overlay exceptions to be consistent with the plan development standards. Also of note on this slide is the storm sewer easement is shown with that blue dotted arrow. This is the new location proposed. It's very close to the existing and keeps the stormwater flowing at its logical low point on the campus. Next, please. A few 3D views. University Crossing is a gateway to the city from the west that we feel will benefit from the increase in scale and density this project will bring. Again, surface parking mostly in the existing state. The project will have green roofs in a couple key areas. Next. The parking structure capacity of 792 is unchanged from the previous submissions. Our patients largely seek our services when they are not strong, whether physically or mentally. It's just the nature of healthcare. And while the parking provided might feel high at 3.3 spaces per thousand about GSF, it's actually about 25% below industry average of 4.5 per thousand for parking to support outpatient clinical. And this is an acknowledgement of Madison's great public transport network, the local BRT, and the support UW Health has of their staff, especially utilizing it. We have completed a TDM and include provisions to encourage non-auto use, which include a B-cycle station on site, ample bike parking, showers changing long-term and short-term, subsidizing Metro bus passes for our staff, and carpool prioritized parking. The parking structure is enhanced by a full solar array on top of the building, which will generate power for our use on site. And then additionally in the foreground, what are currently additional surface parking lots will be reestablished as a native landscape with the removal after construction. Could you go ahead 2 slides, please? Perfect. This development will activate the street. Circulation will happen along the glass on every level of the clinic. So not only we get increased exterior presence via patrons, but interior activation with the clinic. Next. And regarding our exception request related to the drop-off, a little bit of a closer look. Again, assisting our patients to safely disembark from an array of arrival methods with the ability to reach their medical destination without great tribulation is a guiding principle of UW Health's patient access philosophy. As mentioned, a change from last year is there's now a Metro bus stop directly in front, which is awesome, and we welcome it, and we're going to provide a bus shelter. We've increased the island a little bit between the street and drop-off for better pedestrian safety. We've landscaped it by sliding the building back a bit. Near the foreground, you can see the revised outdoor respite space, tables, chairs, a place to take a break in the sun, wait for the ride or the bus. We do feel this elevates the pedestrian experience compared to the previous design due to the proximity of this space to the main entry, project gateways, and University Ave specifically. Really, the TOD is about University Ave and activating that vibrant neighborhood, and this part of our site especially is best positioned to reap the benefit of University Avenue. There are multiple connection points from the public sidewalk into our project along University Row, which we think create a meaningful pedestrian experience. Next. And then finally, while solar and green, solar and green are easily identifiable. A couple of more passive advantages of this version of our project is the significant reduction of energy demand due to the elimination of 3 floors of underground parking.
Yeah, that concludes your available time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chair, those were the only registered speakers for this item.
Thank you, Megan. Do we have any further questions for our registrants? Commissioner McCahill.
Thanks. Question for Jen, I guess. I understand the point you're making about having drive-up access be convenient right in front of the building, but knowing that it is a TOD area and that discourages that type of design, did you consider other arrangements where the loading would happen on the back or side?
We did. I have to thank Tim here. We did work through a couple of alternate options, one of which was to provide like an unloading area between the clinic and the parking structure, which was essentially over that storm sewer easement that we're trying to provide. So that just did unlock a lot of a challenge in terms of long-term access to the storm sewer easement. And then ultimately our next opportunity to get patients into the building was to swing them all the way around the south side to the back of the building, which is really the already established loading zone for the existing DHC. So then you kind of have patients mingling with semis and truck traffic. And we tried to do it on 2 different levels, but then the patients were coming in over the trucks and it was an unsafe there was just a lot of complexity. So ultimately what we came to was, the best situation is that a patient in a walker, a patient in a wheelchair are entering the same place that a patient coming off the bus are, and they are greeted by the same front door experience in our facility. So that's kind of the access philosophy at UW Health.
Okay, thanks. I guess one more quick one. I realize the space constraints you're dealing with the parking garage, but did you consider any ways of activating the street space, the street frontage.
Yeah, I mean, I think we thought about moving the bike parking towards the front, but I don't know that would have necessarily activated the street to the extent the zoning code is recommending, although we're open to it. I think introducing another component into the project, an outside entity, for instance, retail or whatever, is what became the kind of insurmountable challenge in terms of the UW Health tenant and the safety and security of their parking structure being maintained.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Uger. Nope, never mind.
Question for Jen. Could you just comment on reaction to the recommendations of the Urban Design Commission and what you'll be doing in response?
Yeah, absolutely. So to quickly summarize, I think they were fully supportive of our clinic edition. And as I mentioned, the TOD exceptions. They are looking for us to come back and revisit them with some different aesthetic options on the parking structure, which we are happy to do. Just acknowledging that there's room for improvement in some of the cladding opportunities on the metal product to make sure that we're even more integrated with the clinic design and the parking structure design. So they had a number of very kind of specific findings in regards to that aesthetic development on the parking that we will be addressing, working with city staff.
Thank you.
Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. With the chair's permission, could Jen just finish her thoughts on sustainability features that she was starting just before her time ran out?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Tim. Jen, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. This was the last slide. So again, we've got some pretty active features like our solar panels and our green roofs, which we're thrilled about. But I think the passive advantages over the previous version of the project is eliminating the 3 floors of underground, means we don't have to pump and dewater for the next 50 years, which does save energy. And then switching to natural ventilation for the parking, again, due to it being above ground, is also a big improvement over the mechanically ventilated underground structure we would have had. So in addition to all of the other things we're going to do, which are shown on the screen, bird-friendly glazing, green roofs, envelope. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Do we have questions for staff? If there are no questions for staff, I am looking for a motion. Alder Uger.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Based on the comments from staff, I'm going to try to incorporate the proper things into this motion. Finding that the project is consistent with the community mixed-use recommendations for the site in the comprehensive plan and the standards for approval being met, that the proposed clinic addition and parking structure be approved with waivers that have satisfied the commission as to their appropriateness, including the waiver of and exceptions under section 28.104 sub 7, requiring 30% of the primary street-facing facades be set back no more than 20 feet, that there be waiver and variance or exception to the requirements of section 28.104 sub 8 regarding certain access requirements, and that the parking structure be exempt from providing active uses along at least 50% of the primary street-facing facade.
Thank you, Alder.
And that it be approved subject to the recommendations of the Urban Design Commission and the conditions from reviewing agencies in the report.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Heck. Alder Uguer, would you like to speak to your motion?
I will just say, and I published some remarks available in the Register, so I won't go over all of those details. But this has been a non-controversial project, either in its first approval or this approval in the neighborhood meetings that we've held, and a lot of positive comment for all of those sustainability features that we just heard about from Jen, in particular, this opportunity to add a full rooftop in the garage area solar array is an additional opportunity that we have here. I'd also like to call attention to the effort that went into properly handling the stormwater and the easement between the garage and the additional building and the protection it provides for the nearby residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. There's no further discussion. We will come to a vote. And for agenda item 13, I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Commissioner McCahill? Oh.
Yep. Yeah. You can put me down as a no vote.
Okay. Therefore, we will have one no, all remaining in favor. Motion passes. Then we need a motion for agenda item 14 for the CSM. Alder Uguer.
I move approval of the CSM.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Heck. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. We will move on to our last public hearing item, agenda item 19, Register 84827, 5048 Thorson Road, Town of Sun Prairie, consideration of a CSM within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction to create 2 residential lots.
Yes. Looking at the staff report and also looking at the most recent registration report, there's nobody in attendance for that item. And as such, staff would recommend that the Plan Commission refer this to a future meeting to allow the someone, either the property owner or their surveyor, to attend the meeting and present their argument as to why the request to divide the property on Thorson Road should be approved. Staff is recommending that the standards may not be met, and therefore I think the applicant and their team should be able to speak to that before the Plan Commission makes a decision. However, I'm happy to present the matter if the Plan Commission would like to decide the matter tonight.
Thank you, Tim. Alder Field.
Chair, may I ask a question of staff?
Yes.
Tim, thank you. Can you remind me, I know you would mention this in the staff report, but can you remind me when the 90-day period is up after which it is presumed by state law approved?
The 10th of November. So we could, we'll reach out to the applicant tomorrow, Wednesday at the latest, and let them know if the decision is to refer, that it has been referred. Tell them to get their act together and come on down and participate. And if they don't, we just have to make a decision by the adjournment of the November 4th Plan Commission meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Alder Duncan.
Recommendation to refer to a future meeting.
Seconded by Alder Field. I will assume unanimous consent on the referral unless I see a raised hand to object. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We will move on to business by members. Do we have any business by members? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that I will be absent for the October 7th Plan Commission meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Heck. I will note that I will be chairing that meeting again, so thank you all for your patience as I get back into it. Alder Huger.
I just wanted to commend our temporarily serving chair here for a great job tonight.
Thank you, Alder. Moving on to the secretary's report.
Okay, I'll be pretty brief. You can see a list of items that were recently approved by the Common Council following your consideration. Both the zoning amendments that were on your agenda at the last meeting were approved by the Common Council. That was related to standardizing some of the dimensional requirements in the traditional residential C4 district and approving the allowance for the downtown height bonus to be applied to student housing projects. So we're working right now with the Community Development Division on how to implement that that second piece related to the height bonus. At your next meeting, I think one of the items of note on this list includes 3450 to 3614 Milwaukee Street. This is the former Voight Farm. This will include the final plat for that property, creating 13 lots for future multifamily residential and several lots for public uses and other private uses as well. Later in October, we have a couple projects that include a number of actions associated with them. This includes one at 2430 to 2450 East Washington and 10 to 16 North 7th Street. This will include demo, rezoning, conditional use, and CSM related to the replacement of several buildings on those lots with a 5-story mixed-use building, including 76 apartments. There's also a similar project at 623 Shave Road and 10122 White Fox Lane. Sorry, my brain can't process that number at this hour. Demo permit rezoning and preliminary and final plat to demolish a single-family home and create 45 lots for both single and two-family dwellings. So those are among the projects that we'll see at our next meeting. And unless there are any questions, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Megan. All right, with that, I will look for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Alder Field. Do we have a second? Seconded by Alder Duncan. I will assume unanimous consent. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Have a great night.